Okay, welcome back to educator.com. This lesson is on dividing decimals. Okay, so when we make sure when you're dividing decimals that you apply the correct rules for it. Okay, don't get confused between when you add and subtract decimals and when you multiply decimals. Okay, dividing decimals is actually very different. So before we begin, let's go over some words. Divisor and dividend. When I divide two numbers together, if I have, let's say, 10 divided by 2, this top number is the one that's going to go inside the box, right? That is called the dividend. Okay, so this top number, the number that goes inside the box, is called the dividend. And then the bottom number, the one that goes outside the box, is called the divisor. So here's a divisor and here's a dividend. Okay? So when we divide decimals together, we have to make sure that the divisor becomes a whole number. So if this number right here is a decimal, then we have to change it into a whole number. And the way you do that is by multiplying both the divisor and the dividend by the same multiple of 10. Now, we don't care if this number is decimal. It's only the divisor. So, let's say that the divisor is 0.2. So it's 10 divided by 0.2. It's a little high. So 0.2. Now, this is not a whole number, right? We have a decimal. We have a number behind the decimal point. So I count how many numbers are behind that, the decimal point, and there's only one. There's one number. That means I need to multiply this number by 10. So 0.2, multiply it by 10 so that this will become a whole number. So because 0.2 times 10 will just become 2. Okay? If I have 0.22, I have two numbers behind the decimal point, so I have to multiply it by 100. Okay, so there's two numbers behind the decimal point, then I have to have two numbers, two zeros here as a multiple of 10, so that way this will become 22, okay, or 22.0, same thing. So we'll do a few examples of those. So for this one, I have to change the divisor to a whole number. 0.2, I have to multiply this by 10, but that means I have to multiply the dividend by 10 also. I can't just multiply one of these numbers by 10. So if I multiply 0.2 by 10, it becomes 2, and then 10 times 10 is 100. So this becomes 2, and this becomes 100. Okay? And so this will be the actual problem. Now when you find the answer for this, it's still going to be the same answer as if you're dividing this. Okay, so that's the rule, though. You have to make sure that this becomes a whole number. Place a decimal point in the same place right above the dividend. So the decimal point here, now we don't see a decimal point because it's a whole number. If it's a whole number that doesn't show a decimal point, it's at the end. It's right there. So let me make this longer. Now, as long as it's behind the decimal point and at the end of a number, I can add as many zeros as I want. I can add 1 0, I can add 10 zeros, I can add a million zeros. It doesn't matter. Okay? So 100.0 is the same thing as 100. So here's a decimal point. I'm going to place a decimal point right above, right there. And I know that this is, my answer is going to go on top here, right? So let me give myself some room. Okay, so now when I solve this, I know 2 goes into 10 5 times, and then 0, bring down the 0. 2 goes into 0, and 0 times. So my answer just becomes 50. 2 times 50 is 100. Okay, so, or I can just make this, if I bring down this 0, again, 2 goes into 0 0 times. So it's just going to be 50. The answer will be 50. So again, the first rule when you divide decimals together is to make the divisor a whole number by multiplying it, multiplying this number and this number to the multiple of 10, so that decimal point will go behind the number and it becomes a whole number. And then once you multiply that same number to the dividend, you place a decimal point right above here, and then you just divide it the same way. Okay? So let's do a few examples. 26.2 divided by 0.4. So this is the first number, this is the dividend, and this is the divisor. So the dividend goes inside the box, 26.2, and then 0.4. Okay, now I have a decimal in my divisor. I have to make it a whole number, right? So in order to make this 0.4 a whole number, I have one number behind the decimal point, so I have to multiply it by 10. 0.4 times 10 is going to be 4. Since I have 1 0, I can move the decimal point one time to make it bigger, and then it becomes 4. So then I have to multiply. If I'm going to multiply this by 10, then I have to multiply the dividend by 10. So if you want to think of it this way, you can do that. Or a shortcut would be just to move the decimal point once here, and then move the decimal point for the dividend once also. Okay? So let me just rewrite this. It becomes 4, and then my dividend is 262 because the decimal point moved behind the 2. So it's right there. Okay? And then I can place a 0 at the end of it. And then the next thing I do is to make sure I bring up the decimal point. Okay, so it's lined up. And then I can just divide it the same way. So I know that 4 does not go into 2, so I can put a 0 there, or you don't have to. 4 goes into 26. 26 divided by 4. How many times does 4 go into 26? Well, 4 times 6 is 24. So I'm going to write that number. Oops. Write that number right there, 24. Subtract it, I get 2. I bring down this 2. 4 goes into 22 5 times, and that becomes 20. I subtract again 2. Bring down this 0. Now this 0 wasn't there, right? I placed it there because it's behind the decimal point and it's at the end of a number, so I can place as many zeros as I want. So I can bring down the 2. 4 goes into 20 5 times, okay, and then that becomes 20, and then I have 0. So I am done with the problem. My answer then becomes 65.5. So this is my answer. Okay, so 26.2 divided by 0.4 is 65.5. Okay. Sharon bought 6 CDs for $42.08. How much does each CD cost? Well, if she has this much and she buys 6 CDs, each CD costs the same amount. So $42.08 divided by 6, right? So let's do $42.08 divided by 6. Okay. Now, I don't have a decimal point here. Okay, well, it's at the end, but I have a whole number. So I don't have to worry about changing this number, right? Changing my divisor. So I can go ahead and just divide. The next step would be to bring up the decimal point. Don't forget that. And then I can divide. So 6 goes into 42. How many times? 7. So 6 times 7 is 42. That becomes 0. I have to bring down the other number, 0. 6 goes into 0 times. And that's 0. 0. Bring down the 8. 6 goes into 8 one time. 6. 2. Now, I can add a 0 at the end of this, right? Because it's behind the decimal point. It's at the end of a number. So I can bring down another 0. Now I don't have to, I can just leave it like this, but if I want to see, if I want to round this number, then I can just just do this, the next step. I can just do one more time. So 6 goes into 20, how many times? 3, and that becomes 18, okay, 2. Now I can just stop there because since I know I'm dealing with money, I want to see how much each CD costs. I know it's going to be in dollars, right? And dollars only go to my hundredths place. I only have 2 numbers after my decimal point, right? So how much is each CD going to cost? $7.01. Now the only reason why I did one more number here was to see if this was a 5 or greater, then this can round up to 2. But it's smaller than 5, so then I can keep this as a 1. So it becomes $7.01, okay? And that's the cost of each CD. My next example, 77.44 or 77 and 44 hundredths divided by 11. 77.44 divided by 11. Rule number 1, make sure this divisor is a whole number. It is a whole number, okay? Step 2, raise up my decimal point right there, okay? So now I can divide 11 goes into 77 7 times, and then I subtract, this becomes 0. Bring down the 4, fits into this number, 0 number of times. That becomes 0. Subtract it, I get 4. Bring down this 4. 11 goes into 44, 4 times, and then I get 0. So 77.44 divided by 11 becomes 7.04. Okay, my next example, I'm going to do 45.218 divided by 0.23. Or I can read this as 45 and 218 thousandths divided by 0.23 or 23 hundredths. So remember, the first rule in dividing decimals is to make sure that this number, my divisor, is a whole number. Now it's not a whole number because there's numbers behind the decimal point, right? So I'm going to count to see how many numbers I have behind the decimal point, and it's 2. I have 2 numbers here. So what I'm going to do is take that number 23, multiply it by, point 23, and multiply it by a multiple of 10 with this number many zeros. So there's 2 numbers, multiply it by 100 with 2 zeros. This becomes 23. And if I multiply my divisor by that number, I have to multiply my dividend by that number also. So I can just take this number, move it 2 places this way. That's the same thing as multiplying it by 100. And then I have to take this decimal point and I have to move it 2 places, okay? So this was where my decimal point was originally, and then it moves right there, 2 numbers, okay? So whatever you do to one number, you have to do to the other one. So if I write this over, it's going to be 23 divided by, 45.218 divided by 23, okay? And then when I divide this and get my answer, it's going to be the same thing as if I divide that and get my answer, okay? So my second rule is to bring up the decimal point, and then I can go ahead and divide. So 23 goes into 45 one time. So this becomes 23. I subtract it, I get 22. I bring down the 2. Now, how many times does 23 go into 222? Now, if you round this to 25, I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times. So, and this is 200 and something, so I can, let's see, if I just try, let's say, 9. 23 times, or if I do 23 times 10, it's 230, right? So that's too big. So I know it's going to be a little bit less than that, which is 9. So 23 times 9 is 27. There's 18, 19, 20. Okay, 207. So 9 goes there, and 207 goes there. Subtract it. I get, okay, so then I have to borrow here, right? So this is 12, this is 11, or 1. And then you subtract it, I get 5. This is 1 and 0. Now what's my next number? 1. I'm going to bring down the 1. Again, let's see how many times does 23 fit into 151. Again, 25 into 100 is 4 times. So if I, let's say 4, and then let's try 6. So on the side, I'm going to do 23 times 6. Okay, 18. Okay. So, and then let's try the next one. 23 times 7, that's 21. 14, 15, 16. Now, which one do you think it is? Is it going to be 6 or is it going to be 7? Now we know it's going to be 6 because 7 is too big, right? This number is too big. It can't be bigger than this number. So I'm going to write the 6 here, and then it's 138. Okay, if I subtract it, okay, let me give myself some more room. Okay. And if I subtract it here, so this will be 3. Okay, I'm just borrowing, right? So this is 4, becomes 11, 13. Now, what happens next? I have to bring this 8 down. Okay, so 23 goes into 138. How many times? Well, look at this. It's the same number. So I know that 23 times 6 is 138, right? Put a 6 there. So let me rewrite this right here, 138. And then 23 times 6 was what? 138, right? So if I subtract it, then I get 0. I have no more numbers to bring down. I have no remainder. So my answer is 196.6. Okay? And that's it for this lesson on dividing decimals. Thank you for watching educator.com.